Coming up on episode 67 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Sacramento Kings, they're falling apart and slumping. Is there a way to fix this? Is it time to panic? We'll see. The Niners. Ben's got a hefty vent this week with the season on the line in Buffalo. Does he think we'll get a win? The Eagles. They're flying high, dude. Saquon playing the best football we've ever freaking seen. How are they going to do against the Ravens with their own offensive player of the year? We'll talk about that. The Chargers just lost a tough one to the Ravens. Can they bounce back? What did we like about that game? What did we not like? We'll talk about that, and we'll finish with our betting picks of the week. Without further ado, guys, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Reds. Ben, we are missing a specific team and involving our backgrounds. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm making it through. You know, it's Thanksgiving week. Obviously as you know, my backgrounds are gone. I'm in a little bit of a different spot today because my wonderful, beautiful girlfriend is downstairs prepping the Thanksgiving meals that we're going to be partaking in on Thursday. So a little bit of a scenic change, but that's okay because I don't really feel like supporting my teams this week, dude.
Yeah, dude. So let's get into it. Well, as usual, we will start with the Kings, and as you guys can see, the win tracker is exactly the same as what we had last time. Now, we're 8-10, and things are not looking great. And we get some guys back, but then now Trey's out for 3 to 4 weeks. We might be getting Jae Crowder in the building. Okay, does that mean anything? We'll talk about it in a second. But when it comes to this slump we're in, because it's a pretty bad slump and things could get worse before they get better, what are you seeing? Like, what do you think some of the issues are with why we're struggling so much?
It's hard because this team right now, they struggle with a lot of the same things that we saw last year, but they're almost struggling with things more than they were. And this is a roster that, when we look at it on paper going into this year, we were super high on it. And we talked about, how we think this team is at least a 50-win team. Like, that's not necessarily bottom level, but that's where they should be because that's where the expectation's been. But this season, it's been more of the same. The 3-point struggles are terrible. We can't make a 3. And then we're letting teams just make 22 and 20 and 19 threes a game against us. And it's not sustainable. And right now unfortunately there's an identity issue going on with the Kings where it's, this team of 2 years ago in 2022 when they made that playoff run, when they finally made it back. This was a high octane offense that was unstoppable. And players across the NBA were talking about it. NBA analysts were talking about it. Kings fans knew what they were seeing. And we were like, no, this team's legit, whether y'all want to sleep on us or not. And we'll be back. We lost that game 7 to Steph, and we're like, we'll be back. It hasn't been the same since 2022, dude. And it's frustrating. So I feel like there's that identity issue. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk about recently in some of these wins that they've had, we talked about how they've had to claw their way back and how the resilience and they're doing well to make up for a big, deficit that they're in. But then the other side of the coin is, why are they getting into these deficits in the first place? And we have inconsistent quarters where we're scoring 12 points, 15 points. And I'm like, how is the team that has these guys, this collection of players, only scoring 12 or 15 points in a quarter? And it's those quarters that take away a game where we were playing really well the rest of the way. So it's just these moments where we just collapse, and then it just leads to a loss, and it's just disappointing. And listen, like, we got Malik back last night and he put up 14, but I'm looking at some of these box scores along the way, and like, we're not getting anything from the bench. Nothing. And like, these 3 guys would be doing, I think, in my opinion, their impact would be felt a little bit more with the big 3 if our bench stepped up just a little bit more. Like last year, it was crucial. and this year it has just been a constant thorn in our side. And I don't know, I don't know how to fix it. And at the same time, it's like Mike Brown can run these kind of lineups, but at the same time, he's trying to stagger the veterans, and
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no consistency here, and I don't know about you, but I feel like with Demar's presence, he's a leader naturally, right? But I just wonder, you mentioned an identity crisis, but do you also think that this team might have like a leadership issue in the sense of maybe there's too many good players, but no one's really standing out as, hey, I am the leader of this team and lead by my example type of thing. Do you notice anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, from an outside perspective, it's when you're watching these guys on the court, you're obviously you're seeing Foxy go for 60 and 49 on back-to-back nights, and you're seeing these individual games, but you're not seeing a consistent presence. You're not seeing a consistent play from any one player yet this season. And mind you, there's been injuries up and down the roster. There's been weird, rotations like we've talked about. But when I'm looking at when this team goes through a slump during a game, not just on a stretch of games, but during a single game, when this team falls into a funk, whether it be, the poor shooting or the poor defense, or even for this matter, for actually what I think is more something to do with leadership, is when there's referees and officials who are calling things a certain way that isn't going your way as a team. You have to have a leader that steps up and rallies your guys together and tells them, like, look, lock in. This sucks, nothing's going our way, but we can change this. We can lock in, we can do this. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen one player step up and pull this team together, circle them up and say, look, we're not getting any calls right now. Nothing's going our way. Ball's not going in. Let's lock in where we can and let's try and get some stops and have that defense turn to offense. That's what I think's missing. It is a leadership thing.
Yeah, it seems like this year in particular, and listen, some of it's justified. We've talked about this on the other pods, but like it just seems like there's a bit more frustration this year. They're letting their anger get to them a little bit more than they normally would. Like Domas is complaining a ton, and listen, again, he's getting decked every game. I don't blame him, but Demar's complaining, De'Aaron's complaining. It just doesn't seem like there isn't anybody who isn't that cool, calm, collected. Like, oh hey, you know, next play, guys. And I agree that, that might be some of the issue that we're seeing here. I don't think the talent is the issue, and I don't think the system is the issue either. I think that it's hard where these guys are mentally dealing with the same issues every game where they're playing good defense and teams make tough shots on them on those possessions. And then the times that they give up, a wide open shot, sometimes they'll get away with it and it teaches bad habits. But it's like that feeling of them not getting the reward is mentally affecting them throughout the course of a game. And when the way that our schedule's been set up, we're playing 4 games in 6 nights. Like for the start of the season, we're playing a lot of games all at once, and there's no real, you have to adjust on the fly. And we're watching against some of these deeper, better teams. We are getting outmatched because if we're not flowing right away, we're in trouble. And it almost feels like and DeMar said this. He's like, we start off way too slow and we allow ourselves to get into this hole, and then the urgency kicks in. And he's like, that's a dangerous way to play. That's a dangerous way to play in the NBA. Like you can't just feel like you can turn on the switch at any time when you're not able to every single game. So I think we're running into a lot of these issues. But it's frustrating, and I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about a lot of this. If this keeps up, dude, naturally, given the state of the impact of this team, like the expectations coming in, it might actually force us to make moves that we weren't expecting to make going into this, going into the season.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. As far as a personnel change, because when I look at this team and how they're playing through the first 18 games of the season, it's nothing but disappointment. I mean, whether it was the fans or the organization, there was a high bar set on this team going into the season, and it wasn't the highest bar. You weren't expecting a championship right off the get, but you're expecting a playoff berth, and you're not only expecting that, you're expecting to go at least into the second round, and that was known. So with this team, watching them through these first 18 games, I don't see this team even scratching the playoffs with the way that they're shooting the ball, rallying around each other, rallying around a situation in a game. Like, this isn't a team that, if they even did get to the playoffs, that I could see winning 4 games, let alone, I mean, 2, right? So, from a personnel standpoint, obviously our bench is one of the worst in the league, if not the worst, in terms of points per game. When I look at the starters, I'm not concerned there. I don't feel like there's a starter problem on this team. I think there's interesting combos that you could have as your 2 guard, and that has some things to work out there. Obviously, with Keelan getting some reps to start, and then Kevin taking over the reins this season. But when we look at this personnel for the Kings, I'm thinking it's something on the bench. I don't know what you're seeing, and in terms of what we need, is it a wing? Is it perimeter defense? You know, where are you seeing the biggest need for this team going into, I mean, the trade deadline?
I see the big, this is an issue that still has been there. We still struggle against these long athletic teams. And it sucks because we only have one truly long athletic player of our own in Keegan. And I feel as if there are times where when you're watching the game, we just consistently look like the smaller team. And we're always having to punch above our weight in terms of our size. And it works when we're spread out and shots are falling and we're moving at a pace that's faster than everybody. That's the point. And that's understandable. But we're running into teams where we're getting bullied and we can't fight back when Domas is our strongest player and there's 2 strong dudes on the other team. So it's just hard. I think we need a backup center that is I was watching, we're watching the Thunder game last night, right? And you're watching Isaiah Hartenstein on this roster, and Chet Holmgren is the starter. But to have a guy who can play so similarly in the sense that he is capable of handling the ball, his passing's at a whole nother level this year, like stylistically, they don't have to go away from anything that they do because of Hartenstein's ability to recover for Holmgren. And we don't have that. Like, Len is a different kind of center than Sabonis, and even Orlando Robinson. Like, you saw him trying to make passes, but we haven't gotten enough of a look to see what that looks like yet. So we could use a legitimate backup center that's kind of like Domas, like almost like I guess option would be like a Mason Plumlee style player, someone who can come in, make those changes, and be just fine. And then we have, for the wings, we could use a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith style, or if they wanted to go big and make a big trade for a guy like, Kuzma would still be available if we financially made the right sense. Like, how big of a swing is this team willing to take? Or like a Cam Johnson, right? Like, you want a guy who's lengthy, can shoot, and defend. And because we have guys who can defend, but they're mainly guards, and that's tough when we have to continuously guard above our size.
So let me ask you this question then, before we kind of conclude this topic.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 apparent needs on this team, and they're on both sides of the basketball, defense and offense. So what do you think is the more pressing issue right now? Does it make more sense to fill the defensive need, or does it make more sense to fill that offensive need in terms of shooting?
I think, dude, I think it's the defense. Like, and I get it because like this team is capable of playing good defense, but they are more capable of scoring. Even though that's not what's happened this year, this is a team that is known for scoring, and then defense comes second. So if you bring a player who can be that connector, like, and who can defend the tough matchups while also just hitting a few threes a game, that alone could be a game changing. And I think that's just something that we're missing because we're not getting the consistencies from the guys who should be handling those roles. Keegan's playing great defense. He's not making his shots. Like, if that was changed, if Keegan was defending and still hitting his shots, we probably wouldn't be having this kind of discussion for this kind of player. But until that starts happening, we're in dire need of a more versatile player who we can mix and match lineups with. I think whenever we take one of those guys out, then we're just smaller, and it just makes things harder.
And I agree with you on the defense, because if you look at who were the last 4 teams left in the playoffs going into each of the finals last year, all of them were good defensive teams. They all had a defensive presence to them, let alone their offense was cooking. So defensive teams are going to have more of an impact on on a season than an offensive team. Because, I mean, look, guys are athletic as hell right now. I mean, we're at an all-time high in terms of athleticism. Getting points on the board is a pretty easy feat in a lot of ways. I don't think there's a single team right now averaging under 100 points a game in the league. I would be surprised if there was, personally. But by that standard, to be able to shut down teams rather than outscore them, I think is going to be easier. I think finding ways to get stops when it actually matters and get stops early, so you're not putting yourself in a slump, and playing from from above rather than playing from underneath, that's a massive difference. Because talk about a confidence when a shot doesn't have that much weight versus when a shot has a lot of weight. When you're down 16 points and you get one stop, and then you go down the court and you have a wide open three, there's a lot more pressure on that one shot, even if it's the second quarter, because you're already down 16.
Exactly.
You have to hit more shots after that. But if you're up by 5, 10, 2, if you're a tie game, it's a little less weight. So I think that like, this is kind of like an aha moment in a lot of ways for me as I talk about this. I'm seeing, we talk about, and we've seen this team all year long dig themselves into a hole in the first quarter. In the first quarter, like the first 20, 15 minutes of the game, right? First and second quarter, they're in a slump. They're in a 15-point hole, and they have to shoot their way out of it. Well, they're not shooting well because they're consistently in a hole. And there's a lot more pressure on every single shot. But one thing we saw last night, and we saw in even the Brooklyn game at times, was this team was able to hit more shots. And we've seen shots go in over the last 5 games a little more consistently. But then that hole happens where they go in that slump, and every shot means that much more. They're not making things. And that's when you start to see those numbers just decline. And that team, I mean, look, last night with the OKC game, the refs completely took them out of the game. And I'm not saying with the bad calls, but it was their overall, like, their attitude. You could sense and see the attitude shift in this team. In the Kings team that had their backs against the wall at that point, they gave up. They were like, well, I mean, it's already tough enough. We've got to beat the Thunder. Now we've got to beat these 3 guys out here too.
Yeah, so it's funny because you see this in football too. It's the teams that are the more physical, who are not afraid. Like you're watching, Shea's a freaking free throw merchant, and he just goes in, but he's not afraid to just go ahead and give everything he has and just dive in there, knowing that he's going to get these calls. And that attitude is infectious for a whole team to just be aggressive. So I just think that for us, especially on the second night of a back-to-back, when shots aren't falling, we do just give up. And I think it's one of those things because we're like, listen, we don't have the same level of energy as this other team today. And you never want to be in that spot, but we're finding ourselves in that spot more often this year than we have in the past couple of years. And listen, like, again, they get pressed and then they catch up, then they start playing well, and then all of a sudden they get a lead and then they get comfortable again. I don't know where that happens, like where that mindset just shifts. But the consistency is missing from this team, and it's just a matter of when they find it. And going into these next stretch of games, we face our good old friends the Timberwolves again, and that's going to be a tough one. Like they've had our number in close matchups, and that's going to weigh in on us if we don't stay consistent with them. So, I'm worried about this next stretch because, if they go on a bad slump here, even if this slump continues, you and I we're going to be having a different kind of conversation in the coming weeks here, and it is a little nerve-wracking.
And that discussion is going to be uncomfortable because we just talked about, I mean, there's going to be a trade that happens, but I'll put it out there just as a kind of a heads up. Like, if this team continues to slump, I have a feeling, Marcos, we might be having a legit conversation about trading De'Aaron Fox, because he's at his all-time high in value, and right now it seems like what recipe they're throwing out on the court isn't working. And it feels like eventually, if it's 20, 30 more games of this and you're just throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, it might make sense to move past a player that you might end up having to pay over $300 million anyway.
Right. From a team building perspective with the new cap rules and everything, these are the
Right.
issues you run into if you're not a successful team and you're spending as much money as you are already on just two players with him and Domas. So it is a realistic conversation and it's not out of the realm of possibility, which sucks. And it would suck to have that conversation. So we'll see. Hopefully this team can rally over these next few and, kind of reset and put themselves back in a position to, make some moves here.
Yep. So we got the Timberwolves tomorrow or today when this pod comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Friday, we got an NBA Cup matchup. The Kings are essentially out of the NBA Cup. But look, you still need to go and get a win.
Exactly.
And you're playing against a Portland team that you should be better than them. And I say you should be because you should be. But
they're going to be tough.
You haven't put it down on paper or put it down on the stat sheet that you are necessarily. So go into Portland and try and take care of business. But look, I mean, you put yourself in a slump, not just in terms of a game to game, but in the season. I mean, you're 2 games back from 500 and you're entering a tough stretch of games. It's almost now or never in terms of figuring at least some of this stuff out.
Yep. We're at that 20 game mark. And this is where teams start piecing things together. So we don't want to be on the opposite side of that. That's just going to send us down a bad path. And then we're having different conversations. But we'll digress. We'll move on from this. But hopefully we add some wins to the win counter. It sucks coming in here and not having anything happen. But we'll see. We'll move on to another disappointing topic for my boy here, but we'll be right back. We're going to switch on over to talk some football. All right, we are back to talk some San Francisco 49ers. Ben, listen, I know like last game kind of went as expected given everything that you guys were kind of up against. And it only got worse from the time we talked last going into the game. But I want to kind of just give you the floor because I have no clue where you kind of want to take this discussion for San Fran today. So I'll let you take the wheel. Go for it. What do you want to say about this team?
This is dangerous, man. You're going to get me canceled. No. Sunday was disappointing. And disappointing is an understatement in a lot of ways. I haven't watched this team get blown out like that in a while.
Right.
And this, look, I'm going to dive into my I need to vent segment here because it's going to be a hefty one. This is from the heart. All right. The Niners team that showed up on Sunday was essentially a shell of what they used to be. That was not the Niners team that I've been watching for the past, I guess, 5 years, really. And I put a lot of that game on the veterans of this team. There was a lack of leadership out on the field, similar to what we just talked about with the Kings. There was a lack of leadership on the field. No one was locked in. Nobody was stepping up. Nobody was making a play when you needed to make a play. I'm gonna dig at Deebo Samuel here for a minute, who Terrell Owens before Sunday called him out and essentially said that Deebo wasn't playing like himself, yada yada, and Deebo claps back at him. And I'm expecting at that point a big game out of Deebo. And what does he do? Well, nothing. Really nothing. And he drops 2 crucial passes that he needs to make those plays. I don't care who's throwing you the football. You are what you consider one of the best receivers, and you're considering yourself somebody who is on the upper end of wide receivers and players in the league. You talk about yourself and you hold yourself to a standard like that, but you're not going to make plays. So it's driving me nuts from that standard. And where I really need to check myself is going into this year, I was so confident that this team wouldn't fall into the same curse, the same Super Bowl loss curse that every single freaking team does every single year.
Yep.
And you were like, I'm nervous for you. I'm nervous for you, bro. Like I saw it happen with the Eagles, and you were like, I know how you feel because I was there. I felt what you're feeling right now. And I'm like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. My team's been here before. Yours hasn't. My team's lost the Super Bowl. Well, they just did the same damn thing that they did in 2020. So I'm frustrated, and it's time for me to stop lying to myself and face the fact that this team needs to make some serious moves, injuries or not, because this team needs to readjust. They need a reset in a lot of ways. This season, as much as there's still a chance, there's not really a chance, because you look at the strength of schedule left, you look at these teams you've got coming up, and you look at the hole that you've put yourself in through these first weeks, and it just doesn't seem likely. And let's say you do clinch the division and you do somehow make it through the wild card. Well, I can't convince you right now that team would show up and play a good playoff team in a gritty game of football, because I haven't seen that. I haven't seen them win one gritty game. I've seen them play gritty games and be winning and then lose them in the fourth quarter multiple times this year. So it's time for me to stop lying to myself. I need to face the fact that this team needs to make some serious moves. And it's probably going to start with, Daniel Jones is out there.
Oh, except Danny Dimes.
Except I don't think he's going to be ending up on the Niners. He's favored by what two teams right now to go to?
So most recent reporting, the Niners were he had like 10 teams available to him apparently. And he narrowed it down to 4, and the Niners, Dolphins, Vikings, and Ravens were the top 4. And then it was reported later today that it was the Ravens and the Vikings. And the main thing he wanted was, he's like, I want to go to a championship contender. And it sucks saying that and not having, the Niners, because in a different world, the Niners are championship contenders. But I think he sees that roster and he's like, everyone's hurt. My O-line situation, how much worse is it? How much better is it really than what I was dealing with? And will that make me better? Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. I think in theory, if the team was healthy, it would have made sense. If given the severity of Brock Purdy's injury, but it would have been a weird situation, because that's kind of like it's a win-win for Daniel Jones, but kind of a win-lose for Brock Purdy. So it's like from that kind of narrative, you don't want that. But Daniel Jones, if you're talking about trying to save the season, without Brock, you put in a guy like Daniel Jones, who is, he is a backup quarterback, but he is better than the backups that are on a lot of people's rosters now. So I just, it would have been interesting. But for right now, it's the Ravens and the Vikings that appear to be the favorite, and they said he's going to make his decision tomorrow, I guess. So we'll see.
And that's fine. I played with the idea of Daniel Jones more so at the early stages of the week because I was mourning. But realistically, bro, I'm not trying to replace Purdy, because another thing that Sunday taught me is Purdy's not just a system quarterback. He's just as important to this team as any given player on it. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, maybe more important than most. So I have a lot of faith in Purdy. I think Purdy is our guy going forward. I think this season's been, if you want to call this season a down season for Brock Purdy, that's totally fine, because his numbers are still great. When you're looking at what you would consider a down year, it's great numbers wise. So I'm not complaining about the quarterback situation, but what I am complaining about is everybody is talking to me. Like my barber talked to me today. Shout out Alex, fresh cut. Appreciate you, bro. He was talking to me today, and he's like, what's going on with CMC, bro? And I'm like, well, there's two sides of it. One side, he's not in football shape yet. It takes, I say, like 4 to 5 weeks to truly get into football shape, and that's game shape, right?
Yeah.
The other side of it is, look at the O-line he's running behind now. Yeah. This is something that the Niners need to address, and I'm going to get into this in a second here, and we can kind of go back and forth before we talk about the Bills. But this line that he's running behind, specifically the interior O-line, is garbage, trash. There is no gaps for him to get up there. And when I look at Kyle Shanahan, how he runs his systems, it starts on the interior, and then you get that edge presence so that everybody's starting to pinch in and close in that center. That's when your edge opens up, and you start breaking down the edges. Once you start breaking down the edges, you're spreading guys out. Guess what? Pass game opens up. So a lot of what I'm seeing is the step one in Kyle's system isn't working. And so he's having to start at step 2 or 3 versus opening up a game the way that you would want to by running it straight up the gut. And look, up the gut was working well good enough, at least with Jordan Mason, because he's a power runner, not a shifty runner. And that's why we were seeing a lot of that success, in my opinion, with Jordan Mason, is because he was just pounding straight through whatever. Even if it was our guys in the way, he was going straight through it. He's a baby Marshawn Lynch. But with Christian McCaffrey, especially not in 100% shape yet, being forced back as early as he was, and having to carry the ball this many times, it's going to take him time, and he doesn't have that punch yet to get through that interior line that is just garbage. So I think the biggest thing for the 49ers to focus on going into this offseason, and maybe it's trading to get some picks, because there's a damn good O-line draft class coming up. And I'm looking at a lot of these guards, and I'm like, man, it would make a lot of sense for the 49ers to make some moves, get some draft picks, and get some of these guys in the building, some young guys who are strong, ready to go, and just revamp this O-line, not just for Brock, but for our running backs.
Yeah, and it has to start there. I think, and it's not just the O-line, it's the D-line too. The lines were what made this Niners team strong, and they have become the biggest points of weakness throughout the entire team with all these injuries. So it sucks because you're right. When you look at the Niners interior offensive line, it's a disaster. And, Pooney was the only saving grace at the interior, but Brendel's an awful center, no offense. I'm not trying to be rude or anything, and then Aaron Banks struggles. So, and that sucks because he was looking like something, he looked like a potential piece last year. And he's just not carrying that same success. And it's just this whole team in general, the execution just isn't there. And when you have all these funneling pieces, it's hard. And I just wonder, like, for CMC, you're trying to get him back into game shape. But he does not look like the CMC of old. But at the same time, I feel like I find them running plays as if they have CMC of old back there, when in reality, you just throw in Jordan Mason, who's been executed all year, you wouldn't probably see better results. But I understand, like, trying to work McCaffrey back. But let me ask you this on a personal level, because, this season isn't lost. You guys are literally, you still are in, you still have a chance to make the playoffs by winning the division. You guys are just a game back. But, like, how much longer do you want, like, can you see you guys using McCaffrey the way you are now, versus just saying, hey, maybe he just needs to wait till next year. Like, let's not waste reps on him now. Let's wait till next year, type of thing.
Personally, I think it's next loss, because, next loss, there's a really good chance that you're going to be 2 games back at that point. And at the very least, if you're lucky, you're still a game back, but you've still got some tough teams coming up, and tougher than the rest of your division sees. And at that point, it's just, depending on how Sunday goes, this is going to be a snow game in Buffalo, just a little highlight, pre-highlight. So we know how those goes. Yeah. If you lose this game on Sunday, in my opinion, I think that's where you shut down CMC. And you're not going to regress that much by using Jordan Mason, because Jordan Mason was the 3rd overall running back by yards per game until CMC came back. And then he started getting some of the least amount of reps out of any running back in the league. And obviously he's regressed since then. He's ready for his chance again, because guess what? There's probably like 14 teams, maybe at least 10 teams that would kill to have him as running back 1. So I think this is it. Like, you don't win this game on Sunday, shut it down. At least shut CMC down, because I want to get at least one more really good year out of CMC if we can.
Yeah.
Before we have to, reevaluate things here.
Yeah, and it scares me. Like, every time I watch him, and I'm like, dude, you're not there yet. Like, why are they doing this to you? Like, I feel bad. And it sucks because they could utilize him a little bit more in the pass game type of thing too. I know they tried. He's gotten good catch numbers since he's been back, but it's so hard to just take a worse situation and say, hey, Christian, go be great. Like, you're seeing, you saw a player as good as Saquon, what he looked like in New York, and then when you're behind something competent, it makes you that much better. And that's just a testament to what the Niners are dealing with right now. And a snow game, this is a perfect game for a Jordan Mason type of player who, it's going to be harder to bring down. Like, just let him go right up the gut, and he might
Yeah.
actually have a lot of success. But it's hard because Kyle Shanahan doesn't seem to want to go away from that. But in this game, I know the main point is going to be, okay, stop Josh Allen. But are you confident, in your team going into this game against arguably the best team in the AFC?
I'm not. I'm not, because for me, it's not an argument. I think that team is by far the AFC heavyweight. When I look at the rest of these teams, I think the Ravens look really good, but there's some things that bug me about that team, and some inconsistencies. But with this Bills team, they're cooking, and this has been a great season for them, and they've found ways to win even when things aren't going their way.
Right.
And that's something that with Josh Allen teams and the Bills teams, you haven't seen in the past few years. I mean, look at their matchups against Kansas City, and even their last matchup against Kansas City. Things didn't necessarily go their way the entire time, but they found a way to win. And that's something that they will continue to do because they have no reason to stop. There's nothing stopping them. And that's something that the Niners haven't been able to do this year. So I'm not confident from that standpoint of things. But it's a snow game, which means pass game for both teams is going to be a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
Guys are going to be slipping all over the place. You're probably going to put 7 spikes in your cleats and hope that you're digging deep. But, at that point, every cut that you make, you're likely to fall down. Things are weird in snow games.
Mm-hmm.
And the ball gets slippery. At that point, you lean on the run game so much. And if I step back and I think of it from a schematic standpoint, it makes sense that Kyle Shanahan would win this game because his run schematics are a little more lethal. But when I think about how effective they've been this year and how they just continue to pound themselves into a brick wall, I don't see that kind of success.
Mm-hmm.
So the key for this game is try and get back to the run game that you were establishing yourself in through the first 5 or 6 weeks of this season. Because I think you can find a way to get a win in Buffalo, an ugly, but a win in Buffalo with that kind of a game. And it does mean going back to Jordan Mason. I can't believe I'm saying it, but you have to sit down CMC for a game like this where you need consistent pounded yards where you're getting hit by 4 guys. It's got to be one of those Josh Jacobs style games that he had last week. Also, shout out Josh Jacobs, bro, the freaking beast.
Yeah.
But it's got to be that kind of a game if you want a chance to win.
Yeah, and the snow game might give you guys an opportunity because it's going to change both teams' strategy. It's easier for the Bills, though, in the sense that they're familiar with that kind of nonsense, and it's tough for West Coast teams to come over and try and play in the snow. That's going to be an interesting matchup too. But
yeah,
the Niners, they have to play like they have nothing left to lose because at this point they don't. You're going in with a B team with everyone hurt, and you just kind of have to say, okay, let's just give it everything we have and hope a few bounces go your way. Maybe the snow, Allen is slipping and he's not being able to run the way he normally would. Maybe the game gets weird. So we'll see what happens. But if you had to put a score, you are allowed to be as optimistic or pessimistic in your team. And I know you believe. So what kind of score are we feeling?
I think this is the first time since we started the pod that I'm not taking the Niners to win this game. I've got the Bills winning this one because, like I said, I think that the Bills are the clear favorite. They might be my favorite to win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure. I'm still playing with them. There's a top 3, but I'm gonna say. I think it's gonna be a run game, and I have a feeling that Josh is going to rip us apart on the ground included. I'm gonna say 2017. Maybe no. I'll say 2014. Bills.
Okay, I like that. I'm gonna be a little bit more pessimistic. I feel like it's gonna be like a 28-14 game. But I want the Niners to win. But I just think the Bills are the better team at this point. It's out of your control in that sense. If this was 2 fully healthy teams, it's a different conversation. So, it's not the Niners' turn this year in terms of being healthy, and the Bills are in a great spot. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull for them this week, or not pull for them, but select them this week to win the game.
Yeah, I totally feel it. It's been a rough year. And at this point, you're searching for any vibes whatsoever to go your way. And I mean, I lit up Fox Sports on my post game. You guys can go check that out on our YouTube channel. It I lit up Fox Sports because they would talk about 2 or 3 injured guys at a time, and not the 18 of them that were injured. And now on top of that, Diamador Lenore who gets an MRI, Pooney that gets an MRI. Like, there's team is just, it's not their season, it's not their year, and this happens. This is football, but it always happens after a Super Bowl loss. So if Marcos, if you guys go to the Super Bowl, don't freaking lose again.
Yeah, I know. This is it. We won't get another chance if we do go, I don't think, but we'll see what happens. So let's talk about the Eagles. Let's push on here. Obviously, vibes are a lot better over here. I'm upset that both of our teams can't be good at the same time. We'll deal with it. But
I'll just cry myself to sleep. I'll be fine.
So the big news that I wanted to touch up on, for those, I mentioned this in the post game, please feel free to go check that out. Brandon Graham was the story of this game in the sense of the negative side. Obviously a great win against the Rams, but Brandon Graham ended up tearing his tricep, and he's out for the rest of the year. And what's disappointing is that could be that could be the last game of his career in a Philadelphia Eagle uniform. And that's, tough because he was playing some of his best ball given his age. He was 36 years old and still making big plays. He had a sack, he had a tackle for loss in this game. Like, the good thing is he went out playing very, very well. And he'll always be remembered. I talked about it. I did a whole thing on Nick Foles and talked about how, the Philly special and his incredible run, but Brandon Graham made the play that saved the game and won the Eagles the game with the strip sack on Tom Brady. So he will always be remembered, and he's such a, outside fans don't like him, but the guys in Philly, he's beloved. He is a legend just as much as Jason Kelce would be. He's always been given so much to the community and has always been just such a great teammate and player. He's going to stay, on the sidelines and just kind of just be the leader, the vocal leader on the sideline. But it sucks. It sucks that that's kind of the way it ends for him, because it's just tough mentally to say, okay, I haven't played for 4.5 months at this age, and then to like, oh, I'm going to get in game shape for one more year. That's just a tough ask. So I don't expect him to be back, but shout out to BG for such a wonderful career and, making, providing me with the happiest game ever. So, it's because of him that happened. So shout out to him.
Yeah. And if this is, if it is this last game, it's a hell of a way to go out. Because, like you said, he was putting up great numbers this year, and this game in particular, making great plays, just going out, being that top dog that he's been. I hate him. I can't stand the guy.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, from that outside perspective, like, he's annoying. He talks so much trash, but that's Debo for me, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's these guys who stick around organizations for years and years, and you see them in the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and you see them go through these phases and these stages in their careers, and just, Brandon's been just a hell of a player his entire career, honestly. So if this is his last one, he's put together an awesome resume, something that he can go out on and I'm sure find a lot of positivity in.
Yeah, and that now leaves Lane Johnson as the last member of the core 4 from the guys who won that Super Bowl. He's the last remaining piece, so we'll see how much longer we have from him, and then it's entirely a new era of Eagles football. So it's bittersweet, but I hope that in a way that this can give the team another thing to fight for. So with that, let's talk about just, the moments of the game from the Rams game. Because I want to highlight the main good thing here. And this was obviously the Saquon Barkley game of all Saquon Barkley games. So for my first moments, my first 2, I'm just going to pack in the same thing because they were the exact same play. It was 2 separate 70-yard runs. And on both of those, you're just seeing Saquon's ability to cut back, his lateral movement to just move like nobody else does and just outrun people on both of those runs. He's unbelievable. And those plays are what makes him special, but it's the play that he wasn't even involved in that, for me, screams why he's special. And the final moment is going to be go towards Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell had a rushing touchdown in this game. as we were putting things away. And the first person on the sideline to sprint over and celebrate a touchdown with him was Saquon Barkley. And he's just hyping him up, gassing him up. He's in his, they're celebrating together. And I think it's that emphasis that makes Saquon the leader of this team, in the sense of like he's that spark that we really needed. Because not only is he just such a talented player, but he cares about everybody on this roster, wants everybody to succeed, and he gets more excited than anybody else, whether it's offense or defense. Like, he is that spark for this team that allows everyone else to just do their job better, and they all celebrate each other. Again, this was the 2022 vibes where we were celebrating each other versus 2023 when everything just felt stressful. This is not the same. And it was that moment to me that made me think, like, this is our guy. Like, this dude is unbelievable. So those were my moments of the games from the week. Anything that stood out to you from the Eagles game, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Saquon's incredible. But the biggest thing that stood out did come from a vibes perspective. I was scrolling through Instagram and social media, crying because I'm a Niners fan. But I came across a mic'd up video of Saquon during the Rams game, and what stood out to me is, when you see Saquon get so many yards like this, right, and set a career high, it's so awesome, and you're like, he must feel so good about himself. Like, this is awesome. Well, it was very selfless out there for Saquon. He went up to all of his O linemen and was like, we got 200, we got over 200, it was everything was, thank you, we did this together. And to me, that stood out, because I mean, that's team. That's a team that's not just rallying behind an individual, but rallying behind something that they did together. And I think there isn't as much love given to offensive linemen from running backs' perspectives when it comes to, or rather from a fan's perspective, when it comes to the kind of accomplishments and feats that some of these guys can rack up. And for Saquon to have the kind of day you did, those holes aren't created without that O-line.
It's true.
And they did a hell of a job. So I just, that video was super cool. Watching Saquon go up and have those moments with each individual from that O-line. He didn't go up to him collectively. He went up to each of them individually and had a moment. And I thought that was special.
Yeah, and the part of that mic'd up, AJ Brown was talking to him too, and he's like, "Listen, dude, I think you're the greatest player ever." Like, he's like, "I've never seen a player as good as you." And this is coming from a guy who played on the same team as Derrick Henry as well. So this is a super high praise from AJ Brown. I think it's a testament to Saquon. We've heard him on a couple mics up where he's like, "Man, my teammates are AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts. Like, they're all just like as excited about playing with each other as the next dude." And I think that just helps. And again, this was a game we were missing Devontae, and we're still dropping 37 points on this team. So this was a game that instilled more confidence in me, because this was, again, the record's not going to say, but the Rams are better than the record was over the past few weeks. They were one of the hotter teams coming into this, and I think everyone kind of thought it was going to be a closer game than what it was. But I want to pivot towards, I want to talk about the Ravens in just a second, because it's going to be a great game. But last week, I wanted to touch up on this. Last week, I made this whole thing about, what the Eagles need to do with the Lions to potentially get the 1 seed. And, oh man, whoever wins the 1 seed is going to be the representative in the Super Bowl. I want to walk back that tape a little bit, because I didn't realize, sometimes you don't see the things that are right in front of you or like right behind you, right? Like, there's another team that could, or potentially teams that could maybe just help the Eagles out, even if they don't win, even if they don't get the 1 seed. So for the remainder of the season, I'm going to be a Vikings guy or a Packers dude, because all they have to do is win the division from Detroit, because the Vikings are 9-2. They're just a game back. They're right there. And they still have a matchup at the very last game of the season, which could very well be for the division. So if the Vikings get the 1 seed and the Eagles get the 2 seed, the Lions are the 5 seed or the 6 seed, and then they still have to go on the road. And if, let's say, the Eagles and the Vikings get knocked out early, then still goes through Philly. So at the 2 seed. So the Eagles are comfortably kind of in this 2 seed spot right now, because the Commanders choked away against the Cowboys this week, which was huge. So now we have a 3-game divisional lead, and the Bucks and the Falcons are competing for their division, but I think that neither one of them are going to finish with a better record than the Eagles. So the Eagles are kind of almost locked into that 2 seed. No matter what happens in the North, because if the North wins the 1 seed, then we're set. So there's a real chance that if the Vikings just swoop and take the 1 seed, I'm not as afraid of the Vikings. And that's not that the Vikings are a great team. They're showing that they're a good team, but there are holes that the Vikings have that teams like the Lions don't. So that could be a way that if the Eagles do get the 2 seed, if the Vikings are the 1 seed or the Packers are the 1 seed, it might still run through Philly anyway. So something that I didn't think about last week that I wanted to kind of bring up this week, I feel pretty good about it. Not to mention the Viking schedule is kind of nice compared to what the Lions are going to have to go through. They play less tough teams. And then again, they have that matchup at the end. So I don't know if does that change anything for you and how you feel? Did you know that? Did you know that, or anything like that?
I didn't know that. No. And it's interesting to think of it from that standpoint. I agree with you. I think that the Vikings would be the easier team to have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
I would be careful with the Packers.
Yeah.
Because I know you guys matched up week 1 in Brazil, but the Packers, something happened last year with the Packers in the playoffs where they damn near did it all. They almost went
Right.
the length, and that, look, I mean, playing the Packers this weekend for the Niners, we got our butts handed to us, and I know that's, I mean, it was meant to happen, right? But it was meant to happen, and they took care of business, and they did that. So the Packers, I would feel a little bit more worrisome than the Vikings, personally. So
No,
I
that's
think for
fair.
me, like, I would feel the best with the Vikings, a little bit worse with the Packers, but
Mm-hmm.
then terrible with the Lions. Like, if it's the Lions and the Eagles, it's going to be a good game. Like
Yeah.
I said before, I think I would probably take you guys a lot out of 10 times, just because of what I've seen these last few weeks. But this is still going to be a ball game that you still got to play, and
Yeah.
playoff games are crazy. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The NFC North is crazy with those teams just being as good as they are. And if the Packers win the division, I mean the conference, that means they would have to win out and luck out at 14-3. And if the Eagles finish 14-3, we win the tiebreaker, so we'd still win the 1 seed. So I mean, in theory, that would be a good spot to be in too if that was the case. But it does require the Lions kind of choking away. They have to lose at least one more game for the Eagles to truly have a shot at the 1 seed, I think. Because both of these teams, both the Lions and the Eagles, can win out, but it's just given some of these teams, it's a little hard. But I just wanted to bring that point up. Is there anything on that point before I switch over to the game itself?
I'm looking at the NFC North, and it's insane, dude. The fact that you can be 8-3 and in third place is just wild to me.
Yeah. It's tough. And there's divisions like that every year that just, stand out. It's just like the schedule works for them. They end up winning all their games, and then the losses they take are in their own division, and then they beat everyone else. So it's weird. That's why I'm hopeful for the Vikings, because they could potentially win that last matchup against Detroit at the very end, and maybe just, seal the division. It's going to be interesting. The NFC North is going to be the division to watch for sure. So when it comes to this game that the Eagles are going to play against the Ravens on the road, I'm excited. This is going to be a matchup of two teams that play very, very similar. Some things I'm worried about. Obviously, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. This is my first time with this iteration of the Eagles really playing them. We didn't get them in the Super Bowl year. We didn't get them last year. So this is kind of this version of the Eagles is, first time playing this version of the Ravens. And offensively, the Ravens are a fantastic team. They're a wonderful offensive team. They can attack you in any way, shape, or form. But I do think this Eagles defense has the ability to slow them down, in the sense of I'm really excited to see how often Lamar tries to take these one-on-one shots that he was able to do against the Chargers. He will not be able to do that against Quignon in this cornerback group. Darius Slay's probably going to be out. He got concussed last week. So that falls on Isaiah Rodgers. Isaiah Rodgers had a couple moments last week, but he has filled in for Slay nicely. And if he gets a whole week of practice and then he's going to go in, I trust him as a starting corner on the other side. So I like this matchup for Philly, but some stats that scare me. The Ravens are 5-0 when Derrick Henry rushes the ball for over 20 times. And I don't know if that's just a product, because we watched the game with the Steelers where they completely went away from him, and they do that sometimes. So I wonder if the pressure of, oh, this is a legitimate 9-2 team, like we have to give everything we have. If maybe they're going to be a little less patient with how they approach this game. They obviously have the short rest. They traveled back a day later than the Eagles did. Both teams played in SoFi last week, so they're both going across. But the Ravens defense has been bad, but the one thing that actually has been good is their run defense. They have the best run defense in the NFL. Their teams are only averaging 77 yards on them. That's a stark difference from what Philly offers. Philly has been the best defense over the past few weeks, but they averaged 20 more yards allowed through the ground. And for Derrick Henry, that might be a significant enough difference. So I am interested to see, are they able to get Saquon going through the ground? Or is this going to be a Jalen Hurts needs to step up game and AJ Brown going to have to make some plays? I don't know what's going to happen with Devontae. Devontae, he's going to show up on the injury report. He's probably going to show up limited with that hamstring. But honestly, I'm okay if he doesn't come out. It would suck, but we can win without him. But this is going to be a shootout kind of game. This isn't, the Eagles need to put up 37 again if we want to win this game for sure. Like, the Ravens are going to score, and it's just a matter of, can we follow up through the air? And I believe we can. This Ravens defense hasn't proven that they can truly stop anyone through the air. And last night was tough because if Justin Herbert's throwing to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, we're talking about them in a completely different light versus the receivers they had. So I don't think, the Ravens have been playing some not so great receivers these past few weeks, and not good quarterback play. So I think if Jalen steps up, AJ has a big game, we will be able to kind of do what we want offensively. So I am very, very excited for this matchup.
I think you need a big game out of Saquon to win this game, because I mean, when I look at like I have his season stats pulled up per game. I mean, in my opinion, Saquon, before I even pulled this up, has been carrying the Eagles all season long.
Yeah.
Because I would be concerned with where this Eagles team would be without him. But this is why you bring in a guy like Saquon Barkley, because I mean, him, CMC, Derrick Henry, they run game masks a lot of issues that you've been having. So Saquon's been popping off this season, but the games that he hasn't, there was really only one game that you guys have won where he hasn't been really good, and that's because he played the Dallas Cowboys and won 34-6. You didn't need him to be really good, and you sat him for a lot of it.
Yeah.
He got 14 carries in that game, but the game against Tampa, he had 84 yards, and you guys dropped that game. The game against Atlanta, I mean, he had 95, but he had 22 carries. I would expect him to go for like 150, right? So the games where he's not having as much of an impact, and I'm seeing him get less. You said a number of 20 for Derrick Henry and them being 5-0. I think Saquon needs to see the ball 20 plus times as well. Whether
Absolutely.
Derrick Henry sees it 20 times or not, because it's going to start with that run game and opening everything else up. And when it's all opened up, Jalen is a great quarterback. But when Jalen is forced to make plays when things aren't necessarily open, is when we have seen him make mistakes in the past. And this is where my biggest concern with Jalen comes in, and why I'm always hypercritical of decisions he makes when the field isn't as open. So I think, Saquon is the factor going into this one for me.
Yeah, and I know the Ravens are going to come in giving everything they have. And I think that's also something, though, that the Eagles can use to their advantage. They can counter this. It's not hard to counter, in the sense of, if they're going to stack the box, you're going to get A.J. Brown on Nate Wiggins, and Nate Wiggins is a nice, he's shown good flashes as a rookie, but A.J. just has the size and the strength against this kid.
He's going to cook him.
Even if Wiggins has the speed, AJ's gonna Randy Moss him all game. So it's just like those opportunities are gonna be there, and Marlon Humphrey can't keep up with AJ anymore. Like Kyle Hamilton's gonna be the kind of guy who, where do they place him? Are they gonna stack him on AJ Brown and dare Dallas Goedert to beat them, or are they gonna try and take Goddard out entirely? So this is gonna test Jalen. He needs to be consistent, and maybe the way to get Saquon involved is through checkdowns. Maybe roll Saquon out. Maybe run a few screens. We saw last week they actually ran one good screenplay to Saquon, and it actually worked. I haven't seen a screen work in freaking years for this team. So maybe they can utilize some of that to help Jalen out. Jalen's been doing he's been doing a great job of just guiding this ship. Like, just, hey, don't turn the ball over, keep drives alive, make a special play here or two with your legs, and then make a big pass, and you're going to be just fine. We're going to put up 30. So if we limit turnovers, force Lamar to make a bad play, or maybe we, stifle them for a couple drives, and if we're able to just put up points, we have to win this game by putting up points, like more than this. This has to be like kind of the Commanders game in the sense of the vibe going into it is this going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be, for the Eagles to win, we're going to have to win. I think the score is going to be close, especially on the road. It's going to be, for me, 35-31 Philly.
It's a high score. I
It
like
is.
it. I do also have the Eagles winning this one. I have it being what did I think? I was playing with 28 or 31. I don't know why, but those numbers felt right. So I'm gonna go 28, and we'll go 24, 28-24 Eagles.
Love that. Okay. So 28-24. The biggest thing is going to be Jalen. It's going to be a battle between Jalen and Lamar. Both of those running backs are going to be targeted, and I think that's going to be, let's see which quarterback can win the day. So I'm excited for that matchup. If Jalen wins this matchup and he goes out there and performs well, we beat a good Ravens team who this was my Super Bowl matchup going into the season. This it's going to be good. But listen, the Eagles have, especially now with the Commanders kind of losing a few, they've afforded themselves the luxury of, okay, maybe we can take a loss to a Pittsburgh or to a Baltimore, and it's not going to derail the whole season. We're still fine. And again, that 2 seed is kind of where we're almost locked into at this point. I know there's a lot of season left, but I think we're going to have opportunities to keep stacking wins, even if we lose a tough one in Baltimore. So I'm interested to see what they do. Okay, so let's push forward to our Chargers check-in. And the Chargers just played the Ravens, which we just spoke of, and it was a good game. It was a good, fun game.
It was.
But I think there was something that might have irked you a little bit if you want to talk about it there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Chargers lost, and the 1 game difference that we had on our picks, you won again. So hate you for that. Hate the Chargers for losing that game.
Hater energy, I know.
Yeah, no, I'm just taking L's left and right over here. Don't mind me. But the biggest thing for me, bro, is I don't think the Chargers really lost this game. I think that Quentin Johnson lost this game for the Chargers because, I mean, 3 drops, 2 of them coming at one of the most, crucial times. I mean, not crunch time necessarily, but times you needed to get that catch and you needed to make that play. And, playoff teams and teams who have aspirations of going a distance, players who have aspirations of that, make those plays. So it's unacceptable in a lot of ways, and frustrating, because I really would love to see what happens if he even makes one of those catches. Yeah. What does that game look like? Because I have a strong feeling that game would probably go to OT at that point.
Yeah, and this just shows that this team can hang. I think that's one of those things where, like, the Chargers, yes, they gave this one away and it was missed opportunities, but they've also shown this year that they've been able to survive some of those games. So I do think at the end of the day, this is a good learning lesson for this team. This was a fun, competitive playoff style game. I do think that if they just get Justin Herbert a little bit more help, I know Ladd's going to take another step, but if they can bring in another receiver in the offseason, we're going to be talking about this team a lot differently. And some of these results are this team has the potential to be an even more explosive offense as it's trying to find its identity with Justin more. But overall, great game. It is a tough loss. Those are the games you kind of want. That will be the difference between the 5th and the 6th spot in the wild card. And instead of a matchup with Houston, you're going to get a matchup with either the Bills or whoever else is coming out of the AFC. I'm trying to think. Or yeah, because the Chiefs are going to most likely get the 1 seed. Bills are going to get the 2 seed most likely. Then I got to do, what are my other teams? What am I missing here? AFC East, AFC South is Houston, but they're going to finish 4th most likely. And then the North. Pittsburgh. There we go. I forgot about Pittsburgh for a second. So it's going to be the difference between playing Pittsburgh or playing
Yeah,
Houston, and
Houston.
those are going to be the matchups. Like that sucks.
Right.
Like if you already had a game against Pittsburgh and it didn't go well for you, so those are one of the things you got to look out for moving forward. But it was fun watching the Harbaugh brothers get back
It was.
together, being active. So that was a fun. The narratives around the game were fun. Henry played really well. Lamar played really well. It was a good matchup. So I know, right?
J.K. Dobbins got hurt though, and that's the part that I mean, what if you had a run game? Because Gus Edwards, I think, Gus saw the ball 9 times. I think after that, yeah, he saw the ball 9 times, and he only rushed for 11 yards versus J.K. who saw the ball 6 times for 40, and that was
Right.
before he went out. So the game could have looked a lot different if they could have consistently punched the ball, down the gut, but instead they haven't forced to pass 36 times, which. I mean, Herbs took it on, but he didn't get any touchdowns. He got one with his legs, right? But he didn't throw for the touchdown, which we want to see a little bit more of, especially in a Harbaugh system. But
yeah,
Jim's 0-3 against his freaking brother, and that's it's tough, man. It's tough from a Niners fan perspective because I still love Jim, and it still pains me thinking about that Super Bowl. But the fact that he couldn't have gotten this one. This one sucks too.
I know. Okay, fortunately, they're in the AFC now, so they'll potentially have more matchups together. But yeah, no, it sucks for old Jim there. So we'll see what happens. They got to again, they have a tough stretch here, and it's going to teach us a lot about this team, with how they respond here. But we'll press on. So we'll finish this off with our betting picks of the week. We just got 3, and I'm going to rattle them off here for you. So. I'm going with first one. It's going to be Eagles. 2.5-point dogs on the road against Baltimore. Nah, dude. I got Philly winning. They just need a field goal. They just need to win by a field goal. I'm feeling good about this, dude. Like the Eagles can win this game. And if they win this game on the road, this is going to be a tough game for Baltimore too to have to respond. Short week of rest. They have a lot on the line. They're still chasing Pittsburgh, so it's going to matter for both teams. So it'll be interesting to see who shows up. But I feel confident enough to actually bet on my team, see what happens there. Next up, I said earlier in the pod that I was a Vikings guy, so I'm leaning Vikings this week. They're 3.5-point favorites against the Cardinals, and Cardinals have been. Yeah, I know it was tough. I saw it, but I was like, for the sake of what I'm hoping for these Eagles goals, it's got to be the Vikings winning this one and continuing to press the Lions. And I believe that they will. They're at home and they're cooking right now. And the Cardinals kind of suffered a tough loss at Seattle where they look terrible. So hopefully we'll see if they can bounce back, but I have the Vikings there. Our final pick. We didn't believe in the Chargers last time on my end, but I'm going for them this week. 1.5-point dogs on the road against Atlanta. They suffered a tough loss, but Atlanta is a team that they can beat. They can out-physical this team. They can protect Herbert. I know that they lost, JK, and that's going to be tough, but I have confidence that the Chargers will take it against the Falcons. So those will be our betting picks of the week. Ben, do you have any final thoughts, my dude, before we head out here?
I just want to see some wins, bro. I need some wins under my belt that isn't an Eagles. Like I'm like enjoying the Eagles wins now, which is frustrating. It's the only sense of winning I have. I'll be okay though.
Yeah, so we got to hope that our Kings can get some wins and that the Niners can pull off something special in Buffalo. We will see what happens there. But with that being said, this is episode 67 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above for you audio listeners. The links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, follow, rate, review. We appreciate all the love and support we've been receiving, and we love to engage with you guys each and every week. Pray for Ben. Hope that our teams can get a win for him. And I am Marcos Conan-Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet. We're wishing you guys a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy it with your families, friends, everybody. And we're thankful for you guys. We'll talk to you next week.
That's right. We'll talk to y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.